All right, finally moving on from my brief little jaunt in animation world, we are going to create our bullet stuff, make it so that whenever we press a button, we fire a bullet in the direction that our player is facing, and it will go forward. So we need to look at our bullet right here. And right now all it has is the transform, the sprite render, and that's it. So we know that our bullet will need a collider of some form because it has to be able to run into stuff. It doesn't need to bounce off of stuff, so we need to make sure that it is a trigger, so it just passes through things and triggers something to happen. And then we also are going to need a rigid body on it because we need to be able to tell it to go a direction, and that's easier if we have a rigid body. So let's add a component. Let's do rigid body 2D. Go ahead and look at this because we know we don't need it to have any angular drag. And we don't need it to have gravity because if it had gravity, it would just drop off the bottom of the screen. And we also need to add a collider. Now, my bullet is a very kind of weird shape, so I'm going to use a Polygon Collider. Your bullet might be rectangular or it might be circular, so that's up to you, but I can tell you that on mine, I don't need it to be exactly a circle or exactly a square. I need it to be a different shape. So I'm going to go ahead and edit my collider. Kind of the same principle here as with the comets, except you don't want it to be, it doesn't have to be hyper accurate, it just has to not be unfair, unfairly close on the inside edges. It just needs to kind of match up with the shape, so visually the player feels like they got a fair shake. All right, got my collider. I need to check is a trigger because we don't want it to actually bounce off of anything. And let's apply that back to the prefab because I did all of that on my scene bullet. Okay, and we are going to create the bullet from the player script. So we need to open up our player and tell our player what to do whenever we hit a button. The button we choose, that's kind of up to you. I'm going to use my input manager on Unity to figure out which button I want to use for this, and I will show you what that is once this finishes loading. I'll hop back over into Unity. Boop, boop, boop. Okay. So if you go once again to edit and then project settings and then input, there's fire 1, which the positive button is left control and the alternate positive button is mouse 0. Now if you want the positive button to be spacebar or anything like that, you can go ahead and put it on here. So I don't like left control. That's kind of a weird spot on my laptop keyboard, so I am going to change this to space because that feels like that would be more natural. So now for this particular project, it will always be space. If you're on another project in the future, you're going to have to go back and change these settings if you want it to be spacebar. It only changes it for this one. So yeah, now it's spacebar or mouse 0, which is left click, if you remember from before, whenever we launched our ball. So that's set. I'm going to go ahead and minimize the stuff that you don't need to look at right now. I don't need this. I don't need to know when the player is dying. All right. At the top here, let's go ahead. Let's make a new header. And I know these headers might seem a little bit excessive, and really, you don't really need them. They're just there to make it look neat. But if you want to, you don't have to have these. These are just there because I like separating things and making them kind of organized and easier to see in the inspector, but you don't have to do this. And then we need a serialized field. And this serialized field is going to be a game object. And we want to put a bullet in there. That's going to be the bullet that we drag into our player. And then we need a serialized field that we are going to use for determining how fast our bullet moves. And we want to serialize it for now. We can actually go back in later, and once we're happy with all of our settings, probably remove most of these because we don't need to expose them in the inspector anymore. But for right now, we'll probably want to tweak the bullet speed once we instantiate the bullet. So, anytime we fire a button or we're checking for a button repeatedly, we need to put it in our update method, as you know by now. But we don't want to clutter our update method, so we go ahead and make a custom method. I'm going to put it under player movement. I feel like player movement would be at the top, and then private void fire. Oops, I don't know what I just managed to do. I auto-completed void fire. I hit space, that's what it is. I'm going to erase all this stuff and just type fire parentheses. There we go. All right. If it did that to you, sorry about that. It's very similar to a method that Unity knows what it is. Anyway, so in our private void fire, we need to say if the player pushes a button, then we need to create an object and then give that object's rigid body some speed. Okay, so let's go for, let's see, if, and the way I said that should be giving you some clues on how to write it out. Get button down. And in this case, we're going to use the name fire1 as the button we are looking for. Then do some stuff. Okay? So we want to create a new game object. And we're going to call it new bullet. Will work. New bullet. And how we're going to instantiate. And we're going to instantiate. First, we have to do our object original, then tell it what position and what rotation. So the object original is the bullet we're going to be dragging into our inspector. Let's set it equal to the transform.position, meaning at this point, this is on our player script, so it's going to be the transform position of the player. And then the transform.rotation, meaning the direction that the player is pointing right now. And then we finish this off by saying as a game object. And now that we have instantiated it, we need to give our new bullet some force. So new bullet, which is the name we just gave our game object. We're reaching into that code on that new bullet, and we're grabbing its component, rigid body 2D. And just like we did really for our player movement, if I come up here, we're going to take the rigid body, we're going to add some force in a direction for a certain speed. So rigid body 2D dot add relative force or force? Let's try add force in C. I think I've used add relative force in our player, and we'll see how it differs here. Vector 2 dot up, because we want it to go forward from wherever the player is, and then multiply that by bullet speed, which we have not set yet. We'll do that in the inspector. So as this should work. Basically, we're creating a new bullet wherever the player is, and then we're sending it forward. So popping over into Unity. I'm going to look in my prefabs here and grab my player ship down here. I'm doing it down here because I want to make sure that I drag my bullet from my prefabs, not my bullet from up here, because this bullet from up here is going to go away. This one is the original of everything. This is the thing that I want to clone. So I'm going to grab this, set my bullet speed to, I don't know, 100. We'll see how that looks. Now right now I have a bullet just sitting on the screen. It's going straight up. Let's see if add relative force solves that problem. Add relative force. Yeah, there we go. So now it's relative to the player. So that's why we're using add relative force. Now, you'll notice I've created a bunch of bullets. They are flying all around me, and they are continuing forever outside of my scene. So the easiest way to solve this, well, okay, not maybe the easiest. There are several ways we could solve this. So um, you could create an object outside the edges of the scene that will kill anything that gets to that spot. Basically make it a death barrier like we did with our ball. So if you want to do that, you can, but I'm going to use our screen wrap code and alter it very slightly to make it so that we can use the code from our screen wrap to destroy bullets whenever they get to the outside edge of the scene. So I'm going to save everything. I'm going to close out of Visual Studio. And here's why. Whenever I create new scripts in Unity and I don't close Visual Studio first, it gets all cranky and tells me it needs to reload a solution, and then it reloads it and it doesn't actually reload anything. So if I delete it first, then, or if I close out of it first, then I don't have to worry about it. So in our scripts folder, let's create a script for our bullet and drag it onto our bullet. No, not into our bullet folder. My computer is having a hard time with life. Now I'm dragging you onto the bullet. Are you on the bullet now? Yes, okay. And you're not on ship explosion for some weird reason? No, okay. So I've got the bullet script on there. Let's go ahead and open this up and let Visual Studio load again. So you can probably guess what we're going to do. And if you can, go ahead and do it before I start typing. Basically, we're going to take our screen wrap code, and instead of saying instantiate the bullet on the other side of the screen, we're just going to say destroy yourself. So if that's enough hint for you, then great. It should probably be, but if it's not, you can follow along here. So I'm going to grab private void screen wrap. I'm going to add it right here under my update method. I need to call screen wrap right here, and all these red lines are there because I need to grab also these fields that tell me the height and the width. I'm going to go ahead and copy the header too. And that goes up top. Screen width, screen height. And perfect. Now everything is fine. Now, instead of moving the thing to the other side, I'm going to say destroy game object. Destroy yourself. Pretty simple, right? It's basically the most straightforward code out there. I'm going to put destroy game object on all of these. It's maybe not the best code, and we don't need to, reset the player's position because we don't have that on here. This isn't the player. So this is a vector2 transform.position. I don't think I need this. I'm going to get rid of it. I think I just need to check for the transforms position. That should work. And if I go into Unity, I am going to take this guy right here and figure out at what point he is outside the scene. I don't want him to be like just outside the scene, maybe just a little bit of space. Okay, so where's your transform, little guy? 9.2. So let's call the width 9.2 and okay, your height 5.38. We'll say 5.4. 5.4. It's good enough for me. I'm not going to apply it back to the prefab just yet because I want to double check that it works. That guy should be fine. Now my bullets are doing weird things, so let me figure out what they are doing. So the only thing I've added here is checking if the transform position is greater than screen height or less than screen height. Oh, that's what it is. I use player pause each time. So I'm going to throw this back in here. I probably want to change that variable player pause because it's not the player, it is the bullet, but this should fix it. Okay. Oops. Well, I died. Now they're killing themselves on instantiation. So like you can see, whenever I make it, they immediately disappear. Let me noodle over this for a second, and I will figure it out. Okay, you guys are going to think I'm really dumb. So that was a really simple solution. Actually, what I hadn't done was I hadn't applied it back to the prefab. So this was all bold down here, and it was basically like I was only giving this the instructions, and I wasn't giving the object original the instructions. So guess I figured it out. So I'm quite silly. I'm going to get rid of that bullet for now. Hit play. So now the expected behavior, I should be able to shoot bullets, and these clones happen on the side, and then they delete when they reach the edge of the screen. You can see that happening on the outside edges right there. That is exactly what I want. Okay, so that was a little side trip that cost me a little bit of sanity because I couldn't figure it out for about 5 minutes, but here we are. We figured it out. So, right now, in our game, every time you click or you hit space, you can shoot a bullet. So I think it would be nice if you clicked and held down the button if your bullet would kind of auto fire, and we can use for that a coroutine. So in our player script, we're going to create a new coroutine that handles what happens if you are holding the button down and how long between the number of shots. So let's go ahead and serialize a field. We're just exposing everything in our inspector today, basically. We need a float, and this one's going to be time between shots. And then we're going to name a coroutine, which is something we have not done before, and we're going to call it auto fire. We need to store this information so that we can use it down here in our method. So let's go ahead and start by creating our coroutine. So I'm going to put it above player death right here. So iEnumerator is how we always start a coroutine, and this one's going to be called auto fire. And in auto fire, we basically want to say this information up here, but we want to add some stuff to it. So I'm going to grab, well, okay, here. I'm going to just retype it, and then I'll figure things out as I go. So we want to say if input dot get button down, and then we want that button to be fire 1 still. And then we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to say while true, which means while this is happening, however long the person is holding down the button, we are going to do this thing. And this thing that we are going to do is create bullets, right? So I'm just going to grab all of this, Control X, Control V, cut and paste. Make this match up again. There we go. Okay, so while it's true, it will constantly do this thing, except we also need to tell it to think about how long it's going to take between the two, between running this thing. So because it's a coroutine, we know we need a yield return new, and in this case, another wait for seconds. And the number of seconds is going to be time between shots, because we probably will want to adjust this multiple times. We want to be able to figure it out on the fly in our inspector, and we can hide it later. So if this is pushed while it's true, create bullets, or create a bullet, wait a few seconds, and then while it's still true, keep doing it, basically, is what we are saying. So up here, instead of input get button down fire 1, we need to start a coroutine. So we're going to say auto fire is equal to start coroutine, and then our coroutine's name, which is auto fire, and then semicolon. And then if input dot get button up, meaning they let go of fire 1, then we need to stop the coroutine that we have stored the name of as auto fire. Today's lesson is pay attention to what you are doing, because I wrote this code and then I tested it out and my computer tried to explode because I put this in the wrong spot. This needs to be inside the while true, because if it is not, my computer tries to instantiate all the bullets at lightning speed and bad things happen. So pay attention to what you're doing, or else something bad will happen. In this case, my computer got very hot and very angry. All right, so once you have that little bit of peace in your code, you need to go and in your inspector set the time between shots. Or even better, let's go ahead and give it a value in here so we don't have to worry about accidentally making that mistake. So let's just set it at 1F. That's fine. And in Unity, it's set to 1 in the inspector. That's also fine. But now we don't have to worry about making any extra mistakes. Now when I hit play, here's hoping that everything went all right. I can hit left, right. Okay, I'm not going to freeze. I hit the play button. Gosh. Oh, yep, okay. Yep. Now they're creating, they're moving. Now if I press and hold every 1 second, it is creating a new bullet. Now it's very slow, so that's why I made it a float, because I had a suspicion that every 1 second was a little bit silly. So let's make the time between shots 0.5. Let's cut the time in half. Apply that back. My paranoia is getting the best of me now, trying to make sure I do everything right. Yeah, that feels a little bit better. Probably a little slow, but again, that's why we put it in the inspector so we can mess with it. So maybe 0.25. There we go. That feels like a kind of a rapid fire laser thing going on. It's maybe a little excessive and OP for my player, but that's all right. Okay, now after having our bullets, we've already set them up with a kind of moving system. We've set up our fire system. Now let's mess with our comets a little bit in our next section. We're going to give them direction and speed and make it so that whenever they get shot, they break into smaller pieces, and then if the smaller pieces get shot, they go away. So that's where we're heading next, and hope that it goes much more smoothly than this video.